football player who took a helmet to the hip, big contusion, having a lot of hip pain, couldn't squat, couldn't put his pants on. So they brought him in, and the dad was very stoic, very skeptical, But by the end of the session, I had him fully squatting, and his dad was just looking at me, and he's like, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it, because for a week he couldn't, bend. I had to he couldn't get his arms down far enough to get his pant leg on his foot. He's like, and in minutes, all of a sudden, this thing, he's squatting. Like, I just don't believe it,
I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow. Welcome back to the Undercurrent Podcast. My guest today is Adam Laraway, a physical therapist who owns Focused Physical Therapy out in the Santa Clarita Valley, which is east of LA, out in the Pasadena area, or just north of there. And the couple of things that I really like about Adam are his holistic approach that he takes. He shares my interest in health and really believes and shares with his patients the information about how health influences their journey through physical therapy. And I really like that more holistic approach, which we'll talk about some here in this episode. And then one of the other things that strikes me about Adam is not only the results that he gets with his patients, but the breadth of patients that he's able to help. We talk about how the nervous system is relevant for movement, for pain, for how we think and feel and energy levels and all that stuff, right? But he is really applying that. He's really taking this approach to help people, just across such a broad range of issues, challenges, diagnoses. And I'm excited to dive into some of that today, so you can peek behind the curtains of Adam's practice at Focus Physical Therapy. Adam, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Garrett. I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yes, me too. So there's a lot that you're doing that I really am excited to get into here. And before we do that, can you share a little bit of your professional history?
For sure. Yeah, so I've been a PT for 24 years now. Started back in 2000, came out, worked for about 3 years at UCLA, which I loved. Had great mentorship there. Got to work with a lot of good therapists, a lot of surgeons, really kind of shaped me right out of school. And then moved up about an hour away into a town called Antelope Valley, kind of 3 cities. And after about 2 years there, I became partial owner of a clinic for 16 years. And we were really operating a clinic that was focused on patient care and that type of stuff. And it was wonderful, outcomes, and just absolutely loved it. And then things kind of started to change. And I lived in a different city about 35 miles away and decided it was time to open up my own clinic with 100% control. And so I made the jump, and it's been almost 5 years and been wonderful. And so now I'm the sole owner of Focus Physical Therapy, and we're really focused on, kind of welcoming everybody to we call it the Focus family.
Yes. And what is the origin of that name?
So kind of funny. When I was originally trying to think of how to come up with the name for a clinic, with, a lot of people I think use their, maybe their last name, Laraway Physical Therapy, that type of stuff. But, my ultimate goal was to build a business and trying to be that business mindset. And I think that was one of the hard parts with starting your own practice, especially from scratch, is that, as a partial owner before, I was the director and I ran the clinic and I worked with the personnel, but we were part of a big corporation that did all the behind the scenes stuff. So I didn't know a lot of the business stuff. And so I hired a business coach and kind of talked about if your ultimate, goal is building a business, somebody's not going to want to buy your business with your last name. They're going to want to buy something that has, a little bit more generic, I guess, tone to it or whatever. And so my philosophy has always been to focus on patients. When I do an evaluation with them, I open up, I put my table, my computer off to the side and just, open arms. What can I do to help you? What are we here to focus on? And so I really that kind of stuck with me. I looked at like elite physical therapy, which there was 20 of them, and, all these different, kind of catchy phrases and that type of stuff. But, I just really went kind of back to what my philosophy has been for the last 24 years, and that's to focus on the patient. And so that's where the name came from. Kind of funny. I was driving up to my old clinic one day, and there's an abandoned lot along the freeway, and there was a big huge truck, and the side of the truck said "focus" in like big huge letters. And I was just like, okay, I guess that's my message. This is it. Because I was literally thinking about that name that day, and I was like, that's it. And so that was the thing that solidified it.
How more clear could the sign be?
Right, exactly. And that's kind of been this whole process. The signs are there. I just need to read them.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned, focusing on the patient. We'll get into more of your treatment philosophy and, this focus on being part of the focus family, emphasizing care for the whole family and the breadth of, being able to help mom, grandpa, and sister, all.
Yeah.
We'll get to the breadth of what you're able to do there. So we'll put a pin in that. Can you just share a little more about your experience in that startup process? You mentioned you had been a clinic director, so you knew elements of ownership and leadership, but hired a coach. Where do you feel like your gaps were? Where do you feel like a coach was helpful? What do you feel like were, sort of the biggest challenges and biggest learnings that you had along the way? I know that was a few questions in one there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so it's been definitely an eye-opening experience of starting your practice from scratch and just having to learn all the stuff that goes along with that. As a clinic partial owner before, and then being part of a big corporation, they took care of all the behind the scenes stuff. All the billing, all the collecting, all the denials, dealing with insurance contracts and leases and all that type of stuff. So, I wasn't really involved in that aspect of running the clinic. I was really more just, the director, again, minority owner of the clinic, and running the day to day, working with the staff, making sure patients are happy, that type of stuff. And so, realizing kind of where my areas of weaknesses were going to be, I reached out to a couple business coaches and interviewed them and kind of, tried to get what I thought was going to be the best philosophy, to help me kind of grow my vision of what I thought I wanted my ideal clinic to be. And so, it was difficult to kind of know that stuff, because there's a lot that goes involved with dealing with insurance companies and all that type of stuff. And so, I hired a coach. His name's Brian Gallagher with Mag Business, who, had run 6 clinics and really kind of knew how to do it. I think he got practice of the year in 2011. And so it was like, okay, this guy knows what we're looking for. And one of the things that he said to me that really, I think, kind of helped me is he says, do you want to be the Walmart of physical therapy, or do you want to be the Nordstrom of physical therapy? And we may need to change those terms to more current, current times. But, he was really right, because one of the other business coaches I had was like, hey, we're just going to throw as little money at this as possible and see if it sticks. And I don't think that's how you really want to start a business. You want to jump in with both feet. You've got this vision, and you really got to put the pieces to the puzzle in play, to get that successful. And so that was really the helpful was with that coaching, to give me those other aspects of starting a business from scratch, and having it be a success.
That's awesome. Brian Gallagher, by the way, was our guest on episode 57. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that. And we've gotten to know him over the years. I think he's the one that first told you about the Neubie, right?
He is. Yeah. That's kind of, when I say all the things kind of have fallen in place for a reason, that was one of the things, was starting a practice in a different city, about 45 miles or 45 minutes away from where I had worked. I had relationships in my hometown, but they knew me as a PT in a different city. And, so I needed that differentiator, which is kind of, why I was all in on the Neubie. But, when I was working with Brian right out of the gate, he had, Jason Waz, who also has been on your podcast, had hired Brian to help him get the Neubie off the ground from a physical therapy standpoint. And so Brian had said, "Hey, you got to talk to Jason about this piece of equipment I've called the Neubie. Like something I've never seen." And so I called Jason and had a great phone conversation, and I just was really curious. And so I literally booked a flight and flew out to Tampa in 2019 and spent, I think, 4 days with Jason, and was sold. And I knew that the Neubie was going to be that big chunk of that made me a differentiator, and helping me jump from one city to another, and getting my current surgeons and doctors that I worked with, but helping me because they had their own referral sources in our current city. Um, and so getting that differentiation to say like, hey, let's send you over to Adam. Let's see what's going on, what he can do over there to help you.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's great to have that context here, and I'm so glad that you worked with Brian and this all happened to work out and we got connected and it led to something really wonderful here. So I'm really grateful for that. And
Absolutely.
how so having that the Neubie as a differentiator is is great, and that's also just one piece of it, right? When you're in a new city. So how did you get the first patients in the door so that they could even experience this differentiator? And how'd you go from zero to something and then build from there? What was that first step or steps?
Well, so obviously initially you come, you open your doors, and so you're just trying to get patients in the door. And so, I had gone around and I had a little bit of, I left my other clinic, um, on a good note. I gave them, a lot of notice that I was going to be leaving, for them to kind of wrap up what they needed to do on their end. But I also gave heads up to the surgeons, like, hey, I'm going to be opening up my own clinic, in our hometown here, and I would love to continue to work with your patients. I printed up the white paper and took that around when I would introduce them to it, and kind of say, hey, here's some information on this. This is a new technology that we're using in the clinic. I think it can help speed up some recoveries. Gave them a lot of kind of information. To be honest, it was kind of received with a little like, yeah, I know what an electric stim is, that's great. And I'm like, well, this is kind of different, and I was still new to it too. So, in all honesty, it's like, I was all in, but, I hadn't had the patient experiences other than what Jason had shown me in some of his literature and case studies. And so, it was like, I'm all in though. Let's just try this out. And just right out of the gate had some of these just crazy success stories where, I've been a PT at that point, 20, 19 years, I guess. And, to all of a sudden have some of these success stories and aha moments that, I could get before on my own, but maybe those took me 6 weeks to get. And all of a sudden I'm getting them in 2, 3, 4 visits, and it was really, really cool. And so word started spreading, and it was just one of those. I didn't do a whole lot of marketing at first, other than, actually, I shouldn't say that. I did marketing to the doctors, but I wasn't doing marketing to my patients. My patients were doing the marketing for me. And so that's, again, kind of goes along with what focused physical therapy is. Welcome to the focus family. People are like, oh, I need my dad to come in and check this thing out. This might really help him. And, my neighbor next door has struggled with this problem for years. Will this help him? Let's bring him in. Let's try. And, like I said, it just really kind of differentiated, what was going on. I had, one surgeon, I had two neck referrals that were radiculopathy, looking at going to neck surgery. And within 3, 4 visits, their symptoms were gone. And I got a call from the surgeon and said, can I come over and check out what you're doing over there? And as a new clinic owner opening a new clinic, I was shaking in my boots, like, I'm taking this doctor's surgeries. He's going to come over here and give me the riot act, and he came over, and I put the Neubie on him, explained to what we were doing. And he was like, here's my cell phone. Here's my business cards. I'm going to start sending you more patients. If we can prevent a surgery, let's prevent a surgery. This is amazing. And, yeah, it just kind of, like I said, just kind of keeps spreading, more and more as patients give the doctor the feedback here. My patients are my best marketing source.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that's some great success stories there. I know I've heard offline several, so I want to talk about more of those. So a little bit of foreshadowing, because before we get there, I also want to ask you a follow-up question on this topic here of getting referrals from patients, having them refer in their friends and family. Sometimes it's something that just happens naturally, and that's wonderful. But sometimes some intentionality around that can be helpful. Is there anything that you do in terms of, questions in your intake process or throughout the treatment process, asking who else they know who might benefit from this, or is there anything else you do in terms of any sort of referral, formal program efforts, or is there anything like that you do to kind of nudge or encourage people to make those referrals, or is something that just literally happens on its own? What's your experience there?
I think it just kind of happens. I don't know. That's a really good question. I think about, because I kind of treat the whole age range from about 6 years old all the way up to your 99-year-old. And, it often happens like, I'll have a teenage, high school athlete or something like that. And, the mom or the dad will be in on the eval and, they're watching what I'm doing. And the next thing you know, they're asking like, hey, I got this shoulder problem. Would that help me too? And well, let's come on in. Let's take a look and let's see. I'd love to try it, Um, I can think of an example. Like I was treating a high school football player and, it was kind of interesting. He was actually my last patient of the day, and we were working on drills and stuff with him, and the mom was asking all these questions. She'd had a elbow fracture, really bad elbow fracture, snowboarding, like 25 years ago, and she had years of therapy, and she was lacking. I think it was, if I remember right, 38 degrees of elbow extension, and that's as far as she could extend it. And she's like, hey, do you think this would help me? And I said, I'm absolutely willing to try it. I said, let's just try a little experiment here. And so I literally put a couple pads on her biceps and her triceps, and I had her just straighten and bend her elbow for about 3 minutes. At a fairly low intensity, nothing like that, nothing too crazy. And within minutes, she had, like, no joke, 20 degrees. I think we got to -18, if I recall. And she was sold. She's like, oh, she was like literally started to well up and tear up. She's like, I had years of therapy. They cranked on it, hurt, didn't, but I could never get it any straighter. And so she literally came in and I treated her. I think it only took me about 6-8 visits. And we got her elbow within, like, I think 4 to 6 degrees. She was back at the gym doing everything that she had really had limitations with. I mean, it was just amazing. But then she told 6 other people, and so next thing you got 6 more people coming in. Hey, I heard what you did for so and so. Can that work for me? Well, let's get you in here and let's try. And again, my treatment philosophy, when somebody comes in for an eval, I'm sitting with open arms. What can I do to help you? What can we focus on? And that's where we go.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love hearing that. I will share one related tidbit since we're talking about referrals and things like that. So back when
Yeah.
I was working with people, a client of mine recommended doing, kind of sprinkling in some language that would encourage people to make referrals. And so I tried doing it. I thought it was very, very clever. So I'll just share it here, hopefully it lands with someone here and you'll find it interesting.
Absolutely.
And maybe start using a version of this. But when I was having an initial conversation with somebody in the clinic, I would say, so we're going to be using this machine. We're going to be using the Neubie here to really accelerate the process. Talk about how working with the nervous system can help us break through the patterns and the influences that normally slow down the healing process. And I say, in some respects, it's actually bad for business because my goal is to get you out of here faster. So I want you to start thinking about anyone that you can, any friends and family that you can refer in, because we're going to have to, keep the doors open after we get you out of here in fewer visits. So
Yeah, absolutely.
people would chuckle, but that actually landed pretty well, with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That we also, had a lot of experience too, where it's something that is just, it's a lot of times so different, so unique for people to have an experience when they actually see results right away. And they're like, dang, I want to, oh my gosh, I want to tell, Aunt Judy, or, I want to tell my nephew, my whoever about this, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I'll give one more little story here. I had a football player who took a helmet to the hip, big big contusion, having a lot of hip pain, couldn't squat, couldn't put his pants on, because he couldn't bend his hip enough to get his, arms down far enough to get his feet over, or his foot over into the leg of the pants. And they went to a doctor here, and the doctor said, "I'm sorry, 4 weeks left, season's over, you're done. Like, it's going to take longer than that to recover." So anyways, somebody had told him about what I was doing this. So they brought him in, and the dad was very stoic, very skeptical, that this was going to do anything. And so he came in for his evaluation, and big, huge contusion on his hip. And I mapped him up with the Neubie, and, took him through just some really simple movement patterns, which is sometimes the Neubie's, I think, greatest strength, is you kind of almost have to go back to some of those primitive movement patterns. But by the end of the session, I had him fully squatting, and his dad was just, kind of leaning against the counter and looking at me. And he's like, if I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it, because for a week he couldn't, bend. I had to he couldn't get his arms down far enough to get his pant leg on his foot. He's like, and in minutes, all of a sudden this thing, he's squatting. Like, I just don't believe it, So I ended up seeing him, I think about 4 or 5 weeks, but we actually had him back on the football field. So he missed that Friday, and then he missed the next Friday, and then was back on the field playing, and was able to finish his season, which was amazing. But then, he had a younger brother who was a baseball player. They brought him in, I ended up treating the dad. I ended up treating the mom. So I ended up treating the whole family, for different issues. But, it starts from that one kind of aha moment of like, somebody who was pretty skeptical that we're going to help you. And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, this is really applicable. This is something different. And I think that's been kind of one of the biggest differentiators for the Neubie, is that it is different, and a lot of people, they think they know what stim is, but this is a totally different type of stim with a direct current.
That's right. One of my favorite ways to describe it is that it's like going from an old rotary phone to a modern day iPhone or Android. I'm not trying to,
right.
It's like, yeah, they both can make calls, so there's some overlap, but you can just do so much more with one than you can with the other. So
yeah, absolutely.
People listening to this, you may have heard me say that before, but it's one of my favorite analogies there, or metaphor, and out, whatever. You mentioned, Adam, that your focus is on the patient. You sit there and have one-on-one conversations, really try to figure out how you can help people. And one of the things that I like about you and that we share, I know you and I, we text about just behind the scenes here for insight for people. Adam and I will text about our Whoop scores and about what different things influence our recovery and different things that we're doing. And so I know that you and I share an interest in finding ways to improve our health so we can feel better, show up better in the world, right? It's really, we kind of both
absolutely
see that as an underlying foundational piece of our quality of life there. And I know that you also, have done some additional training outside of physical therapy in terms of more holistic health coaching or, different things like that. So to what degree does that influence, I know you're taking this more holistic approach, looking at your patients, not just, certainly not just, hardware based like traditional physical therapy, looking at the nervous system, if we're talking about that. And also I think more holistic, also looking at lifestyle, nutrition, sleep, things like that too. But can you talk about how that more sort of whole person, holistic perspective influences your treatment there at Focus?
That was one of the things, I've thought about becoming a functional medicine practitioner. It's a little tough, going down that road just because, a lot of that stuff you have to be able to order blood work. And as a physical therapist, we can't do that. I actually have talked to another clinic owner that does it in California, which has a lot more regulations than I think some of the states. But so I was kind of trying to figure out how can I address some of the other things that I think are affecting how people recover. And, the hard part is sometimes with physical therapy, they say you got to stay in what's called your scope of practice, and you can't go outside of that, and so we're not medical doctors that prescribe medication. So I have to be careful. I can't even tell somebody to take an over the counter Advil because that's essentially prescribing medication, which is outside my scope. And so as I, kind of worked with my own health, I've always been kind of like you were saying, like a health nut, trying to hack our systems and optimize our systems. I just read a lot of books and listened to a lot of podcasts, and really started going down that realm of kind of that functional medicine system, and how can I incorporate that in my practice, but then still stay within my scope. And so one of the things I found was that if I had a certification as a health coach, they have a they don't have all the you know restrictions that we do as physical therapists, and so it allows me, as having a credential as a health coach, I can talk about nutrition and I can talk about sleep and I can talk about some of these more kind of holistic approaches, and that widens my ability to talk about that scope of practice, because I think it's huge. I've done with myself. I used to be a pretty avid cyclist, and so back in early 2000s, I'd get up every morning and I put a heart rate monitor on my chest and I would run an HRV test, before we could just have it on our wrist. So I knew whether I could train that day or not train that day, based on what my heart rate variability was doing. And so I've always kind of been that realm, both personally and then trying to kind of seeing what it's done for my performance as an athlete over the years, and try and help not just my athletic population that I work with, but my whole population. If people are eating junk food and they're only sleeping 5-6 hours a night, they're not recovering. They're not giving their body the ability to heal and recover, and that's going to make my treatment less successful. So I do a lot of education with the patients regarding getting adequate sleep, making sure they're following a good nutritious diet that's not going to be inflammatory, and what can we do to basically give their body the right environment to heal. They're coming to me with a problem, and sometimes they've come to me with a problem that they've had for 30 years. Well, obviously what they've been doing is not working, so we got to change something up. And so having that health coach credential allows me to talk a little bit more about nutrition and talk more about sleep and that type of stuff, and get kind of that all those systems to try and get working. And obviously we use the master reset with the Neubie to help stimulate that pulse electric magnetic field, to help with that. I do some stuff with red light, so there's a lot of different components to trying to stimulate those different systems to get them to heal.
Yes, that's awesome. And I think that if you're not looking at that sort of thing, and it's more and more people I think are understanding this based on what people are talking about in social media, and the quantity of people who are aware of this message and stuff like that. So and this is nothing new at this point, but 5 or 10 years ago, probably was really new for people to think about how their lifestyle really how profoundly that can impact their recovery from injuries, and how that can really influence, for the better or worse, the overall trajectory of someone's recovery during a physical therapy plan of care and everything like that. So I'm glad you're incorporating that. I know it's a huge boost, and it's a big part of why you've won all these awards as the best PT in your area there in Santa
Right.
Clarita.
Thank you.
I know that. Before we move away from this talk of lifestyle and health, a little bit away from the musculoskeletal realm related to, but different adjacent topic here. Can you share your experience with your daughter and her autoimmune condition? Because I know that's related to health, and it was a fascinating story. We talked about it the last time we were together. I'd love for you to share that with everyone.
Absolutely. So I have two daughters, and both healthy and happy, until about 3 years ago. My youngest daughter, unfortunately, when she started her menstruation, something hormonally flipped a switch, and she started having some heel pain. And we took her to I actually treated her myself at first, and I could get her better for about 3 days, and then if I stopped treating, then it would come right back. And so then we took her to an orthopedist, and they thought she had Sever's disease, and so put her on some anti-inflammatory medications, which I'm not a big medication guy, but we wanted to try it. But as soon as she'd come off the medication, pain would come back. And then she also had a little bit of like a skin irritation on her big toe. And it wasn't healing. And so we took her to a pediatrician first, and then they referred us to a dermatologist. But it just, like everything that the Western medicine tried, just spiraled it kind of out of control. This little skin lesion on her toe turned into her whole foot, and then to her pretty much 90% of her body. And then she ended up losing about 70% of her hair. And, as a dad, that's probably the worst thing you could have is, feeling helpless that you can't help your child, and, having all these adverse reactions. And unfortunately for her, we kind of had to keep really pushing all these doctors, because everything they did seemed to make it worse. We ended up at UCLA, hospital and Children's Hospital. And so, I was able to treat her with some of the infrared light. We did some Neubie foot baths, and master resets and pulse electric magnetic field. And I was able to improve things quite a bit, but I couldn't quite get all of it. And I should actually back up and say, so she, once we got through all the doctors and finally got a final diagnosis, her diagnosis was idiopathic juvenile arthritis with a subcategory called psoriatic arthritis alopecia, which really affects more older population, but she unfortunately was one of the rare cases that got that. And so anyways, doing what I could on my end to help treat it. But the next thing you know, she's on 5 medications and just feeling horrible and not doing great. And I had sent my wife to a functional medicine physician about 8-10 years ago for hypothyroid, and it made all the difference for her, because what they were doing with her wasn't really helping with Western medicine. And so we contacted him and asked if he would be willing to take her case as well. So he at first was not sure he was going to. He had us send all of our case notes from UCLA and Children's, and agreed to take the case. And so I've worked with him over the last, I guess, probably about a year and a half now. Her hair is 100% back. She's off of 4 of the 5 medications, and her skin is probably 99% recovered. She has one little spot we're still working on currently, but we're almost there. And the functional medicine doctor thinks he's going to get her off this last biologic injection once we get that last spot healed up. So she's doing amazing. And I, continue to use the pulse electric magnetic field mat with her. I use the Neubie with her, doing master resets. If she's got any of the joint pain with the idiopathic joint juvenile arthritis, I'll map her with the Neubie, and that usually knocks it out, until the next time. But she's back to playing tennis. She's a sophomore in high school, and she made the varsity tennis team this year and did amazing. So that was awesome. And just, as a dad, but as a physical therapist too, just seeing her get back to those activities has been amazing. Probably more so as a dad than a physical therapist, but, just to see her have some, getting back to what she should be doing as a 15-year-old kid. So that's been a lot of fun. But again, that kind of solidifies where I come from, the holistic, viewpoint of, you got to figure out what's going on with the systems, and you gotta get them in the right position so they can heal.
Yeah. And, you tried the state of the art, so to speak, UCLA medicine approach, and I had to go somewhere else. So obviously, you mentioned you've been doing master reset and PEMF throughout this, and that helps. And although you were doing, that had been helping all along, and then when you saw this other functional medicine doctor, so what, is there anything or few things that you can point to that this doctor did, eliminating certain offending foods or certain nutrients, or are there anything other things that really move the needle here?
I mean, he is very thorough with ordering a lot of blood work. I've actually started working with him myself, just out of curiosity. So it's been kind of cool. But whenever I go to get my blood work, the nurse will be like, "Oh, your doctor orders the good blood. We don't good blood work. We don't usually see these tests." So it's really informative. But pretty much he treats with all supplements. So I mean, her iron level was low. Like, I don't know how they missed that. So she's on iron and fish oil and vitamin D with K2. I'm trying to think what else she's on, but pretty much all supplementation. We were already pretty clean eating. But he did, stool tests with her and food sensitivity tests. And so doing some tweaks with, even though we were eating pretty healthy to begin with, getting some of those things that were irritants based on the food sensitivity test, I think just kind of helped her gut biome help. The other thing too, when we were working with the orthopedist, again, they thought they were treating the right thing, but, they're putting her on, anti-inflammatories for long periods, and then they were putting her on antibiotics for the skin thing because they thought it was bacterial infection, and so she just ruined her gut biome. And so I think doing a lot of the healing in the gut biome, with getting some of those, because there's nothing that like she was severely allergic to, but getting some of those mild to moderate ones out of the system, or eating them maybe once every 4 days so that her gut biome could heal, really, really has made a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad that you've been able. This story has a a happy conclusion
Absolutely,
here,
yeah.
because in the depths of it was pretty darn
Absolutely,
scary.
yeah, yeah. I feel like we're rounding third base. We're on our way home. We're almost there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you for
Absolutely,
sharing that. Obviously, a little different than what you're doing in the PT
yeah,
clinic, but the Neubie and some of the other work you're doing is helpful. But it's a kitchen
for
sink
sure.
approach, for sure. For there. So
And let me also
let's
say
we'll
too
go we
that
can go back.
Western medicine definitely has its place. There's some really good things at Western medicine, so we don't just do that. But if we can do things that are holistic, that's, I guess, for me my first approach is what can we do naturally to help your body heal. Then if we need to get into some more medication, that type of stuff, then we go down that road. And I apply that to my patient care as well.
Yeah, yeah, and some of that, it all has its place. Sometimes it's appropriate to fight disease. Sometimes it's appropriate to cultivate
Absolutely,
health. Sometimes it's appropriate to do surgery. I
absolutely,
mean, yeah,
absolutely.
so it all has its place for sure. I totally agree with you on that. I think that was well said. Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how NeuFit and the Neubie can impact your life, please visit our website at www.neu.fit. That's neu.fit. So you can learn more about how it might integrate into your professional practice, how you can use it as a patient, and you can also connect with our team there. And now we can transition back to the PT
Yes.
clinic, but also riding this theme of autoimmune conditions. You also told me a fascinating story of an MS patient that you treated at your clinic there at Focus, and I won't foreshadow it any more than that, other than we'll just see if we can go there next because of the connection to
Absolutely.
autoimmunity.
Yeah. So I worked with this person now almost, I think, about 3 years. But when I first started working with them, they were newly diagnosed with MS, really having a hard time, wheelchair bound, able to walk a little bit with a walker. And again, been treating with the Neubie, I think, at this point for about 2 years, so pretty comfortable with what I'm doing and how I'm treating and what my treatment philosophy. But also trying to think about, for MS, the population, is really crucial not to overtax them, and wanting to be very mindful with that. And so started work with him, and we just really worked together. We started out with 2 to 3 times a week, and just started seeing drastic improvements to the point with it. Within, God, I'm trying to remember how quickly, but within weeks, he was walking with a walker almost every time. Ditch the wheelchair completely. Next thing you know, we're going to a single point cane, and then fast forward, he's now walking without anything. And I think I actually saw him this week, and I wanted to confirm the story because I don't have it, in writing or anything like that. But I think about a year ago, he had gone for a follow-up MRI, and he came back from the follow-up, and he told me, he says, his doctor was in the room there with him, and the nurse had put his brain scan up on the whiteboard, and he says to the nurse, he's like, "That's not so and so's scan. You got the wrong scan." And they're like, "No, that's the right scan." And he's like, "No, that's not the right scan." And so, anyways, she shows him on the whiteboard, like, "Here's the patient's name. This is his scan." And some of the plaques that lesions that were in his brain were either improved or gone. And I was just kind of dumbfounded by that, kind of like, and we do a master reset with him every visit. We work on different things, and like, is the Neubie doing this? Like, and so I got really excited and curious, and I have a couple other MS patients. And I actually, a couple of weeks ago, asked one because they had a follow-up scan, and theirs were no worse, but no better. So that's still a success for the MS world, not to have any progression of those lesions. But that was pretty cool to hear that some of the lesions, had disappeared completely, and some of them were improved. So I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around that success. But we're down now. I see him once every one or 2 weeks, basically just kind of for a maintenance. And he is doing amazing. He now goes on short hikes and is completely independent, doesn't use any assistive devices. His strength is doing really well. Spasticity is pretty much minimal, and his kind of numbness symptoms stay pretty much in check. They'll fluctuate a little bit, but as soon as we do treatment with the Neubie, they're back in remission again, and he's good until the next time I see him.
That's yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that I was hearing you talk about that story before. Definitely, very exciting, humbling, gratifying to just hear that impact that you're making there, and it makes me curious. We don't have aren't making any claims about effects of the Neubie like that. We certainly see a lot of functional improvements. We do have a case series looking at functional improvements for MS patients in terms of reduced spasticity, increased pain. There's some literature building on that, but that's that histology change is a new frontier. So something that's at least worth further research and a fascinating data point, even if it's still in the anecdata realm, right?
Exactly.
Or whatever. Fascinating there. And then you also told me, so for everybody listening, Adam was at his clinic is actually, I believe so much in focus that we've made his clinic one of our first centers of excellence. So in the LA area, or the Southern California area, people can go there, clinicians can go there to observe and actually do training with Adam. He's a master instructor, so he can actually train others in how to use the Neubie now. So we were just together from the time we're recording this, a couple of months prior, and I was getting to hear all these stories over several conversations. And so there was another one that you told me that I would love to have you share here. And it's similar, these MS cases are very, can be very difficult when you see someone who's been declining for so long and often has a significant degree of impairment. And to be able to help them is really wonderful, especially because they often have tried so many other things or haven't seen progress, and that can be just really wonderful as a clinician to help those people who are otherwise left behind. Another population for whom that is true, and perhaps even more, is CRPS patients. And remember, you told me a story about at least one. While we're talking about the impact on patients and some of these really interesting standout examples, can you share that experience with at least the one CRPS patient that you told me about?
Well, so I had a high school athlete, had again kind of friend of a friend, had been dealing with it for about 2 years, had been a competitive volleyball player in high school, and just had a major ankle sprain injury. And we were at a mutual friend's party, and my friend was like, hey, you should go see Adam. I bet you he can fix up your son. And so I was talking to them, they just kind of presented it as an ankle sprain. And I'm like, kind of, okay, I'm happy to take a look, see what I can do, whatever. So they make an appointment. They came in and come in and diagnose as CRPS, and like textbook, change in pigmentation, can't touch the area, like having a lot of issues. And so we just started working with the Neubie, and got the nervous system to calm down, and just really started to improve. No change in the pigmentation, but all of a sudden we could start touching it. We could map over it. Tolerance really improved. And, fast forward, I think I worked with him for, about 3 months, but we ended up getting him back to playing volleyball. We were doing, he was at a heck of a jumper. And we were started doing plyometrics, to making sure that we could do everything that we could to make sure that, he wasn't going to have a regression or, a flare up of that CRPS symptoms. And yeah, he's in college now and has no issues. He skis and, I don't know that he still plays competitive volleyball, but, he has no limitations. And it was pretty cool to work with him because it had been kind of stuck for about 2 years of just not getting anywhere, not able to do anything, and as a high school kid, pretty depressing, that, you just can't do anything because everything hurts. So that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's great. That was to be able to help someone like that, again, that there just aren't many, if any, any good solutions out
Yeah,
there. So to be able to help them, I think sometimes, as fun as it is to work with college or professional athletes and stuff like that, I think sometimes those can be even more satisfying. So I appreciate you sharing
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And as we wind down here, anything else that you feel like you would want to share with NeuFit Nation? Anything else related to your practice, other experiences, anything else on your mind that you feel like we should cover here?
Well, I think I guess the biggest thing, I mean, I train, with the Neubie myself. I'm a full believer in it, and I just see the benefits of it. And so, I guess what I would say is to people that are either think about incorporating it into their practice, or even, if they've bought one and they haven't gone full in. One of my therapists that moved to Texas just called me last week, and she interviewed with a clinic that has a Neubie, but they're not really utilizing it to its capacity. And I've heard that a few times from different clinic owners that they have it, but they, it kind of sits in the corner. And for me, I guess I would say if you're going to make that investment in this type of technology, jump in with both feet, and you will not be sorry with some of the the aha moments that you have, both for you and for the patient, and just the improvement and success. The one thing that I guess I would say too, being a manual therapist for 19 years before the Neubie, and having, good success as a therapist, adding the Neubie just sped that process up, tenfold. To be able to do some of the manual techniques and stuff that I do with the Neubie on, can be just a game changer, and sometimes just immediate results. And getting the nervous system and getting it to stick longer, I guess, getting that nervous system to re-educate not only with the manual techniques that you're doing, but with that input through the nervous system, through the Neubie. And it just really, for us, has been a game changer. I have 5 Neubies in my practice. They run all day long on every single patient, unless they have a contraindication such as a pacemaker. But um, you know, patients love the Neubie, and they want to come in and work out with it. From a treatment perspective and from a workout perspective. So, I would say if you're going to make that type of investment, you got to jump in with both feet, and because it is time consuming at first, but once you've learned how to use it, it's just amazing some of the successes that you see.
Yeah, I love what you said there. Definitely, if people are making the investment, yes, we want to make sure they go through the training, they're able to use it. And, thank you for being a resource for other practice owners to be able to
Absolutely.
call and talk to a peer and learn about your experience. So I really appreciate that. And then also, I really appreciate that perspective. As a manual therapist, a lot of people, and I think, this was you in the beginning, of course, hearing it from a trusted source like Brian Gallagher was helpful, but I think you even had that initial skepticism of, being a manual therapist, relying on all those techniques that you have because you've
Yeah.
seen them work. And I think a lot of people have that feeling of like, you know, what am I going to just use some set it and forget it?
Right.
It's just like putting on stem and ice, and just replaces all these skills. And no, like you said, it's just an amplifier or an
Yeah.
accelerator on those skills that you have. You combine those with this, and it's a 1 + 1 = 4 type of scenario.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd like to give.
I'm not just adding math. That was
Hey,
that was on purpose.
I also like to kind of give credit to Jason Waz. Jason. Obviously you have a great relationship with Jason, but Jason really pioneered. I think kind of the physical therapy piece of the Neubie. With working with him and just seeing some of his success stories really kind of motivated me to try and replicate that. And Jason's really become a mentor for me. Just seeing some of the cool stuff that he does, and I talk with him all the time as well. And that's I think one of the best parts of being part of the NeuFit Nation is how many networks of friends, colleagues, co-owner, or owners that want to help each other out, and spend that time. I don't mind talking to. I have all the time. I'm getting referrals, of, hey, can you talk to this clinic owner that's thinking about putting the Neubie in, or, hiring the business coach service. I love that type of stuff because it lets me hear what they're doing, and what's working for them, what's not working for them, and sharing what is working for me and what's not working for me, and collaborating so that we can, because ultimately, most therapists got into this profession because they want to help people, but how do we do that? And then having that network to help each other out, which is crucial. And NeuFit Nation for sure is that. I know a lot of NeuFit owners. So
yes, that's awesome. And I definitely will also second that and shout out Jason Waz. So he was on, let's see, oh shoot, what episode? It was episode 8. There we go. So he was on way back when, episode 8 of our podcast here. And he was the first PT practice owner. So he and I became, fast friends back in 2017. He came to the first certification course that we ever did. And he was, the first PT practice owner. So he and I talked a lot, and he gave me a lot of great input and feedback and advice. And we got to talk a lot about how to incorporate the Neubie into a PT clinic in terms of workflows, in terms of billing, some of these practicalities. And he, he talks about how the Neubie has helped, grow his practice to the point where he can actually get out of the day-to-day of his practice and now do more consulting and coaching with other practice owners. And that's another fulfilling avenue kind of in his new chapter of his career too. So that's all. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. And it's definitely worth a shout. And so if anyone's in the Southern California area, we definitely want to give your website. I'll also shout out, I follow you on Instagram, Focus PT SCV. So Focus PT SCV for Santa Clarita Valley. And then what's the website? Is it the same?
www.focusptscv.com.
Awesome. All right. So please check out Adam at one or both of those places. And Adam, thank you so much. It's an honor to have been able to establish a friendship with you over the years. And I love the work that you're doing. I have a ton of respect and admiration for you. And thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experience with everybody.
Absolutely.
Listening.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, thank you for inviting me into your community and, spending the last 5 years with me, really helping a lot of people. So I appreciate your help too.
Awesome. Well, it's a wonderful thing here, and let's keep the good times rolling, keep the momentum going here. Thank you everybody for tuning in to this episode of the Undercurrent Podcast. Please hit the like, subscribe, tell your friends about the show, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye, everyone.